Hello, I'm Carol Owens, and this is Stockbridge Updates. We meet with you twice a month, and we tell you about the upcoming issue. Now, in the August 15th issue, our editorial is about Governor Maura Healey's new legislation, the Affordable Home Act, and it's very interesting, and I think it's going to be very interesting for us. Essentially, it has two parts. It gives tax incentives for house production, and she's literally looking to build hundreds of thousands of houses throughout the state. She said at one point, when I was elected, we were 200,000 houses behind. So to some degree, she's looking to catch up. So part of it is tax incentives for building houses, and the other is zoning reforms. So for example, in a zoning reform, the town of Lee recently passed a local bylaw that says that ADUs, accessory dwelling units, can be built but only by full-time residents. Now that the Affordable Home Act has passed, that local bylaw is meaningless, and it is superseded by state law, which says anyone can build an ADU by right. Primary homeowners, secondary homeowners, non-residents who want to invest, buy a house on the property, build an ADU, rent 2 units. So that's a change. They also have language in there about tiny homes being placed on tiny lots. So that local bylaws that say you have to have a minimum of so much acreage in order to build will now be superseded by that portion of the tiny lot. It's going to be very interesting. There are things in it that will be helpful to us, and we all agree we have a housing problem. And there'll be some things that will be worrisome for us because it might change the look of Stockbridge, or it might change things about Stockbridge that we've always tried to protect. We're going to have to read it. We're going to have to digest it. We're going to have to look to our leaders, such as those on the planning board, to meet and perhaps have extra public meetings to bring us up to date and let us know what's going on so we can make sound decisions. Another part of housing that's very, very interesting is the Berkshire Community Block Grants. And these grants are given to existing houses that need repair. New roofs, insulation, windows. And for those who qualify, they can get a grant to do that work. In the past, somehow, Stockbridge has never had any applications, but that has changed. We have now been awarded $1,375,000. They will rehabilitate a minimum of 16 housing units in 3 towns, Stockbridge, Great Barrington, and Egremont. Very interesting. There were 21 applications from Stockbridge and only 3 from Great Barrington. So I think we're in a good position to get some of this money and bring our houses up to snuff. And last, before I introduce my charming guest, Tri-Town Health Department wants you to know that this fall there is an additional COVID booster, and they're recommending that we all get it. Now, fresh from a meeting with the EMTs, the emergency medical technicians, is our selectman, Patrick White, and he's going to tell you all about what they've been talking about.
Hello.
Hi.
How are you, Carol?
Hi, I'm good.
So we had a nice meeting this morning. There's a big shortage of emergency medical technicians in Berkshire County. And one of the ways around that, of course, is to have people go through the class. The basic class is somewhere between 80 and 120 hours. It costs approximately $2,000, but a lot of times the towns, if you're an employee of the town, or if you plan on getting a job with a municipal, ambulance squad, will pay that fee. So right now there's a backlog of folks who want to take the class, and they're offered by 2 private ambulance services, one in Great Barrington and one in North Adams. And we're looking at expanding that with a third option that would be based out of the Berkshire Community College campus, with sort of a roving class that might visit further south in southern Berkshire or some other municipalities.
So the good news is that there are folks that want to be EMTs.
Yes.
That's wonderful, because I was worried about a shortage. And then this class that will train them might be paid for by Stockbridge.
Yeah, well, it's one of the challenges is ambulance response time. So if somebody has a significant health issue like a stroke or a heart attack or something, minutes matter. And frankly, if the ambulance can get there in 6 or 7 minutes, you're much more likely to live than if it gets there in 20 or 30 minutes. So a lot of the towns are trying to, even the smaller towns like Stockbridge are trying to figure this out and looking at ways to invest. We've had conversations with Richmond, with West Stockbridge, with Lee, sort of figuring out how all the pieces work. Great Barrington has invested in its own service. Lennox is investing in its own service. It looks like Lee will invest in its own service. But through shared services, in mutual aid, we've got an opportunity to really try to make sure the coverage is the most robust at every corner of the county. And I think that's got to be one of our highest priorities with, Stockbridge has got an average population, an average age of about 63. In the state of Massachusetts, it's 39. So as you can imagine, with a more elderly population, you're going to have more, ambulance calls and need for EMTs.
Right, and more need for EMTs. Yeah. Well, I think that's marvelous, and I understand you're helping them with the, is it the proposal or the business plan?
Well, it's basically, we're trying to figure out the business plan. So, what it costs to get the system up and running in terms of the training facility. I say facility, but it's really just a big room and buying a trailer so they can put all their gear in it and bring it to wherever the room is that you're going to teach it. And it's interesting. People get a certification. It's a whole 9 yards. But there's a number of steps, and we had a really great meeting this morning to talk about this. We're going to try to present something at the next monthly meeting of the ambulance and EMT working group that Smitty Pignatelli has been spearheading. And I'm excited to write something up and try to get it in the hands of everyone for their feedback later this month. I'm not very busy,
running for Smitty Pignatelli's job in the Berkshire 3rd.
Exactly.
You're making time for this.
So the good news is that the 6 or 8 hours it'll take me to write this up will be 6 or 8 hours I'm not making spam calls to get you to vote. So there's always that. We're providing relief in 2 ways to the people of the Berkshires.
I understand that you have kind of a new incentive in your campaign, something about putting Berkshire 3rd on a business footing. Explain to me what that is.
There's a lot of scary statistics around here. We were just talking about ambulances as a statistic, pardon me. But one of the most scary statistics is Berkshire Regional Planning's prediction that the population will continue to drop significantly. So, at the height of Berkshire County, the population was over 150,000, nearly 160,000. Today, 30, 40 years later, it's down to 125,000. And they're saying that 35 years from today, it may be, if the current trends continue, the population will drop to 80,000. That is terrible for so many reasons, because when you don't have a full-time population, it's hard to fill jobs. It's hard to, there's not as many kids around to fill the kind of service jobs that you want to have kids fill, like, the relatively low-paying jobs. It's hard to have volunteers. at the towns. It's hard to run the towns.
And may I say, it's hard to fill the classrooms.
Yeah, yeah. And so really kind of turning that around is going to take, I think, a job strategy. And you know, the private sector obviously is where most of the jobs come from. And there's a lot of opportunities around here. You know, they say that with climate change that many parts of the country are going to be really brutally hot, especially in the summertime. That have you know places that were 100 degrees in the summer may become like the Middle East, where you've got a number of cities that have seen 120, 130 degree temperatures during the day. Pardon me, and just the brutally hot temperatures. Interestingly enough, over the next 100 years, the Berkshires are projected to get a little bit wetter, but really stay mild, continue to be mild. And so there's a lot of brainstorming going on, where maybe what we do is we try to attract a long-term, you know, software or clean tech campus. So really looking at you know, you think about Silicon Valley, Palo Alto, something like that, where they've got, you know, a campus for a Facebook and a Google and an Apple and whatever, trying to get some of those countries to really see the Berkshires as an opportunity to build a campus that could include you know, some housing, but especially the jobs, and then taking several years to fill those jobs. When you think about the ecosystem of a community around private enterprise, that's where, you know, once you have that campus in place, then a lot of smaller businesses open up, whether they're restaurants or whether they're landscaping companies or plumbers or electricians. You know, having the anchor tenant, if it were a mall strategy, then begets all those small little mall shops that are in there. So I'm not talking about retail, of course. I'm using that as a metaphor for how you know, a larger campus could help us jumpstart how the Berkshires look.
Yes, but it gives me an idea, and that is Lanesboro Mall is many thousands of square feet.
Yeah.
And that might be the beginning of an idea.
It could be. I think that Lanesboro's outside of my district, so I'm going to be focused on the 18 towns of the South. I'm thinking Sheffield. I'm thinking New Marlboro. I'm thinking Great Barrington. I'm thinking Lee. You know, Lee's got right over here at Lee. They've got the Greylock Mill that can hold 250 manufacturing jobs, and that's been empty for 10 years.
Yeah.
You know, we need to do a better job at promoting all the long-term benefits of business location here. And in the short term, it's a tougher sell, because we've got, you know, really low unemployment around here because of the dearth of you know, young to middle-aged workers. But I believe that a housing strategy that goes hand in hand with a business development or recruitment strategy can really, over the next several decades, kind of get us a little bit closer to where we were before GE pulled out and took with them all those middle class jobs. Got to kind of get back to like good local jobs for folks in the Berkshires.
That sounds marvelous, really, and it reminds me to say to all of you that primaries sometimes get overlooked, but we have a very important primary coming up on September 3rd in all of the 18 towns of the Berkshire Third, and you should vote. You are voting for the person who will take Smitty Pignatelli's job in the House of Representatives, and I call it Smitty's job because he had that job for 22 years. Your choice this election is Patrick White, Lee Davis from Great Barrington, and Jenny Manassi, also from Stockbridge. So mark your calendars, September 3rd, and everybody, make your voices heard.
I do want to comment real quick, if we have time, on two other provisions of the Affordable Homes Act that I think are especially relevant for these local municipalities. The first is it includes a provision where municipalities can build or subsidize or fund housing specific for municipal workers.
Right.
So, you know, Lee, the last 5 years, the average selling price of a house in Lee has jumped 89%. Stockbridge about 100%. You know, we're seeing tremendously unaffordable housing in these communities. And one of the things that we can do, you know, generally when you build affordable housing, it's hard to preference locals for those units, especially if you take state or federal funding. In this case, they have specifically made it so that our highway workers, our police, our fire department workers, our municipal employees in town hall, where we can basically really start to plan for how we ensure that we have housing available for the folks who work in our towns. And this, another thing that it does is it creates an opportunity for a regional trust. So it might make less sense, for example, for Stockbridge or Lee to build municipal housing, but might make a great deal of sense for 4 or 5 or 10 towns in South Berkshire to get together and build a municipal campus that would be available for anybody who worked in the towns that were participating. So creative thinking, you mentioned planning boards. It's going to be really important for us to take a look at how we protect municipal employees, because man, you don't want the Cape's having tremendous problems finding EMT workers, ambulance workers, police, fire, because the housing's gotten so expensive there. So we want to anticipate these problems before we get there. And I think that the other thing I'll just mention, because I know that Lee has a strong veterans community, is another thing that it allows us to do is it allows us to preference veterans and put them at the top of the list for affordable housing units. So when the units open up in Lee, right near Main Street, that they're building right now, at your option, you could endorse a policy that gives local veterans some preference in terms of those units. And I think that that's another great thing that we can do. Sometimes people get out of the armed forces and it's harder for them to find a job. So maybe having access to affordable housing while they look for a job. A lot of times the military make great police force members, fire department members, or town administrators,
right.
All sorts of roles. So
right.
That's just another area where we've changed the law, and I think those are both two really great developments.
And just to whet your appetite a little bit, and all of you to think about contacting your planning board, and here in Stockbridge certainly, and asking them to educate themselves on this new legislation. A lot of what Patrick was just explaining to you is resting on a new definition. And what happened was Cape Cod and Nantucket went to the governor and said, many of the things that you plan to do with respect to creating housing and affordable housing won't work in a resort community. For example, the average price, the median price of a house in Nantucket is $3.2 million.
Right. They fly the teachers in.
Now that is a whole different world, and no one can afford to live there but the uber wealthy, and they tend to be second homeowners. What's happening in Stockbridge, when I moved here half a century ago, the summer population was 25%. Today, it is 60%. We are changing, and as Patrick said, we're becoming more like Nantucket, more like Cape Cod, and less like some of our North County neighbors. And so we have to decide if we want to take advantage of these exceptions.
And I think this is a good example of persistence. There's a senator from the Provincetown Truro area, a guy named Julian Sear, really nice guy. I've met him a number of times. And he proposed seasonal designation in his first term as a state senator. And this is like 8 years later, and it finally gotten done.
Yeah.
And I think that that's a really good persistence. Some of the challenges we face, we've got to keep reminding people over and over again. And eventually, it gets through the thick skulls. Government sometimes works at a slower pace than you would like. But this is an example of a big win, the seasonal designation. A lot of the provisions in that Affordable Homes Act now only apply to Cape Cod and the Berkshires, none else. And one other point I'll make about that is, in the bill, it says that we automatically get designated if we have a minimum of 40% second homeowners. All right, Stockbridge is about 60%, so we are automatically on the list.
Right.
Now, a town like Lee is still around 90% primary homeowners. Even Great Barrington, I think, is only about 20-25% second homeowners. So those municipalities won't automatically be designated, but there's going to be a process for towns to apply to the Secretary of Housing for the Commonwealth to get that designation anyway. And it's my read of that law that every one of the towns in the Berkshires can meet at least one of the criterion of that designation. There's 5. And so I would also get your select boards involved, because getting that application in, all this does is it gives you more local options. There's no reason not to be designated. It just gives you more flexibility in state law than other places have.
Okay, I'm going to stop it there.
All right.
Okay.
I could talk about that, yeah.
No, it's not that. We're getting a little bit into the weeds, but
Yeah.
I thank you so much. And, don't forget to vote September 3rd, and we'll see you again before the end of the month on Stockbridge Updates, and we'll remind you again then. So thank you so much, and Patrick.
Thank you.
Thank you.